Hey everybody, so welcome back. This is another Majestic INFJ, and this is going to be the second video in a series of videos where I'm going to talk about domain shifting from your polar function to your tool function. And if you haven't already, you might want to watch the first video in this series where it talks about TE polar in the INFJ and what it means to be domain shifting from making a goal or a given task at hand shift that's in the TE domain and shifting that into the FE domain. Because I give a little bit more background on what the polar function is and what I mean by domain shifting, things like that. But rather than repeating all that in each of these videos, feel free to watch that one first. Okay, I think this one and the rest of the videos will make more sense that way. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to be talking about those who have FE as their polar function. So in other words, FE is in their seventh slot, and here we're talking about the ISTJs and the INTJs. And so again, whatever's in your polar function is, whatever your polar function is the function that, you're not completely missing it. Everybody has all 8 functions, but it's the function that takes the most mental energy, the most mental resources, the most attention to work with. And so when you're presented some sort of issue or some sort of task where you have to use that domain, it's going to suck up a lot of sort of mental energy, so to speak. And so the natural inclination is to try to shift whatever you're doing from the polar domain to a domain where you can solve the same problem using your tool function or your second function. Okay, so in the ISTJ and the INTJ, where they've got this polar FE, my argument is, they're going to take a FE situation or an FE task and try to shift it into more of a TE type task. So the example that I like to give, and this one just cracks me up, is sort of a FE tool user. It sort of cracks you up. So I think about, when I'm thinking about sort of something in the FE domain, I'm thinking of, going out and socializing, right? Just sort of being able to naturally present yourself and naturally interact in the social domain. That's a very FE thing. And if you're a heavy FE user, in your first or second slot, then it just sort of comes naturally to you, and you don't really have to spend a whole lot of attentional resource on it for it to come naturally to you. If you're FE polar, this is sort of the stereotypical socially awkward person. You hear all the time INTJs are socially awkward, and to some extent ISTJs are socially awkward, and that's because they're in a social situation there where most people are engaging their FE, they are FE polar, so it doesn't come as natural to them. They have to spend a lot more mental resources on it. So what they'll try to do is shift it into a TE domain. And the example that I like to use, getting to it, is for those of you who sort of work in a professional setting where you have interns, that are sort of going through sort of an internship and they're trying to get hired. That's a very interesting combination of a TE versus FE kind of situation, right? Where the work they're doing, on their internship, a lot of times is just pure TE type stuff, and ISTJs and INTJs are great at that. But then, most companies and most firms want to get to know the person, and so they have all these social events where they invite management out and the interns, and they'll go to a bar, or they'll go to a baseball game, or they'll go to some sort of show, and so now you as the intern, you have to start showing off your FE capabilities, right? And so what you see happen a lot of times is that the older people who have sort of been there for a while, or people have been there for a few years, so not necessarily older, but people have been there for a few years. They'll start giving all the interns all these little TE type tips of how to act at these social gatherings, right? Because a lot of the people who are 4 or 5 years in, they're probably a lot of them are probably ISTJs or INTJs, and they were told these little tips along the way, and so now they're imparting this knowledge to the new generation, right? And so you'll see you'll see these like little rules of thumb that the older folks will tell the younger folks, like, don't drink more than 2 beers at any given event. And when you meet with so and so, or if you meet with a partner or upper level management, here the thing, here's something that you should talk about. Here's a topic to discuss, or and then little rules like try not to spend more than 5 to 10 minutes talking to anybody, and just sort of politely excuse yourself and move on, so that you don't come across as like overbearing or annoying somebody. And just all these rules, and and I have no idea if these rules are good rules or bad rules, because when you're an FE user, all this stuff just sort of comes naturally, and you just do whatever you sort of naturally do. But if you're FE polar, you're going to sort of lock on to these rules, right? And it also reminds me of 10 years ago or so, there was this big phenomenon in the internet of these guys trying to teach younger guys basically how to pick up girls, like how to be quote unquote pickup artists or something like that. And they had all these little TE rules about what types of clothes to wear, and where to stand, and what to say to somebody, and what your opening line should be, and all this stuff that's very just again sort of robotic, and you can pretty much program into a robot or a computer program some sort of TE rule. And and you see these videos with these poor guys who are the teachers are probably not, some of them I think were probably FE polar, but they were so good at TE that they remember all these rules and it worked for them. And so now again they're imparting their knowledge to the younger generation. And then like the students are, typically your standard sort of FE polar ISTJ or INTJ, and anybody who's gonna sort of sign up for a class like that most likely is FE polar, because they're trying to figure out how to sort of navigate in this complicated social domain, basically picking up girls, and asking girls out for dates and things like that. And, that is just a foreign domain to them. And so if you could shift it from an FE domain where you're dealing with just social interaction and, just conversing with people, just having a natural flow, a natural way of building up relationships with all the strong FE users can do just sort of automatically for the most part. If you shift all that into just these little bite-sized TE rules, then maybe they'll have some success. talking to women or talking to people in the social domain. So to me, that's probably the best example that I can think of shifting a particular context or a particular task at hand, and that's basically just interacting with people and getting them to like you, and trying to shift that into the TE domain. And when you see sort of the typing videos a lot of times, particularly on talking with famous people and some of the other ones, I don't know. To me, it seems pretty easy to pick up, who the FE polar types are, and you kind of get it right away, especially if you're an INFJ or have FE sort of up towards your front stack. And the reason is part of being FE is just sort of, I guess, being able to read the room and pick up on just what comes naturally to people. And the INTJs and the ISTJs, you can tell, you can see them trying, and they actually a lot of times will come across as very sort of affable, likable people, but it's like, but you also see the effort behind it, right? You see them just like the wheels are turning in their head, and you can see that they're trying to implement the little rules that they've come up with or have been told along the way. Now, the ISTJs and the INTJs are a little different, because the ISTJs are very good at just sort of picking up the rule and going with the rule. Like, don't drink more than 2 beers. Don't take more than 10 minutes of somebody's time when you're engaged in a conversation. Don't talk about this subject matter. Do talk about these subjects. That's all just sort of rule-based. ISTJs are great at it. And, as long as you don't sort of throw them a curveball and throw them off their game, they're going to be fine, usually. The INTJs, on the other hand, people will tell them the little rules, and then they'll use that introverted intuition and they'll come up with their own rules, right? That may or may not work. So they don't have that sort of heavy SI of, just stick with the plan. They'll come up with, all these rules and then some sort of universal rule that they think applies in every situation. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So sometimes they can come across as, pretty charming and pretty affable, because they had a strong enough introverted intuition where they figured out something that works, right, with people. But again, you do see this effort behind it, as opposed to an INFJ or an ISFJ, where it just comes naturally to them, and you don't really, it doesn't come across as they're really putting any effort into it. Okay. So I think that's probably a good way of thinking about it. If you're dealing with an ISTJ or an INFJ or ISTJ or INTJ, you'll see that a lot. The other thing I wanted to point out is, if you're, this is the classic example of if an ISTJ or an INTJ male has a girlfriend who's who is stressed out and just wants to vent, right? They're having a bad day at work, or, so-and-so, their sister or somebody upset them, bad hair day, just, one of those things where they just want to vent, and what they're looking for is sort of an FE response of, that really sucks. I'm really sorry. Somebody to just sort of be empathetic and share that with them, and and then also just sort of motivate them and be like, it's really going to be okay. You're focused on the right things, and just stay focused and stay positive and things will be okay. Just a very FE type of solution to the problem, right? Let's just try to keep everybody happy, keep everybody motivated. And a lot of times that's just what somebody's looking for when they want to vent. But the ISTJ and the INTJ are notorious for just saying, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And why don't you just, block this person if they're annoying you and, just don't ever talk to them again? Or why don't you switch jobs? Or why don't you, do this, that, just very sort of TE solutions to whatever the girlfriend's problem has to be. And again, a lot of times, the person who's doing the venting is not looking for an actual practical solution. They're just looking for some sort of empathy, some sort of proverbial shoulder to cry on because it's going to make them feel better about it. And they're not really looking for, so much of a practical solution. But the INTJs and the ISTJs are notorious for, just sort of not catching on to the fact that, whoever's doing the complaining is just looking for, a buddy to complain with and, sort of a misery loves company type of thing, and looking for sort of emotional support and, encouragement that everything's going to be okay. Instead, they think of it as like, this is a problem that needs to be solved, and you can solve your problem by, getting a better job or asking for a raise or, just blocking that person from your cell phone or whatever. Again, very practical solutions. So unfortunately, they're going from something that should be handled in the FE domain into the TE domain. So for those of you who are INFJs and or really any type, and you're having one of these sort of FE or even FI sort of emotional crises, and you're dealing with an ISTJ or an INTJ, that's all that's happening, right? I mean, they're just trying to take something that's clearly an FE situation, issue, and domain shifting into the TE domain. And, and so they're trying to use their TE tool function to solve the problem rather than their FE function, which is buried down there seventh in their stack. So, okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully provides some level of insight of that domain shifting between FE and TE. And I'll be doing other videos following up here on the other functions, domain shifting and the other functions, when people are polar in those other functions. So feel free to leave comments, let me know what you think, and if you've got any other suggestions. Okay, thanks. Have a good one. Bye.